Welcome to the Startup Grind.
All right. Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Startup Grind Madison. Yeah, thanks for coming out to our first event. All right. So thanks for coming out to Startup Grind Madison. This is our first of many more events to come. I just have a few things. Basically, Startup Grind, it's a global community designed to educate, inspire, and connect entrepreneurs. They have chapters in over 100 cities around the world, and now we have Madison on the books. So I'm Paul. I'm a UW student, a 100 state member. This is Greg.
Hi, my name's Greg Hudson. I'm also a 100 state member, and I work at a tech startup here called Fetch Rewards.
So basically, Greg and I, we started this chapter because there's a lot of really cool startup stuff going on in Madison that's really happened over the last few years. And so we really want to highlight that and kind of use this medium as a showcase to, display all the cool stuff that's going on in Madison. I do have a couple quick shout outs. First off, thank you to 100 State. If you don't know, this is where you are right now. Basically, in a nutshell, 100 State is the best place to co-work in Madison and meet all sorts of creative and collaborative people. And also a quick shout out to Derek and Catherine of BIMVid. They're doing the video for us. It's also a live feed, so send a love to the internet. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's local entrepreneur. Considered wiser beyond his years, he got into business at 15, becoming an owner and operator of Bored to Death, a retail skateboard shop in his hometown of Menominee, Wisconsin, before attending Whitewater as entrepreneurship and Spanish major. While at Whitewater, Henry and his two friends, they got into home brewing, and the idea for crowdsourced beer recipes was born. Since then, they've been brewing at their location at the House of Brews on the east side. Since then, Henry's been nominated for a lot of different awards, but most notably the M-List from Madison Magazine. And most recently, their recent brew, Batshit Crazy, a coffee cream nut brown ale, won second place at the Great American Beer Festival. So, please give it up for Henry Schwartz.
Thank you.
Henry,
Hey,
thanks for coming.
definitely. Glad to be here.
So, I guess just a quick question. How many people have actually bought Henry's beer from him, by show of hands? Okay, nice. Very nice.
How many of us have had it for free at various events?
Great.
Yeah, even more. That's not a very good conversion rate right there.
So I guess just to start off, how'd you get started with entrepreneurship? Was it part of your family, or how'd you become an entrepreneur at 15?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in passions, and I have to say a lot of it has to do with my mother. One of the very early on things she taught me was, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I kind of really took that to heart, and the punchline is then do it. So I always ran into all these processes. It was like, Henry, what would you do if you weren't scared? What would you do if you weren't afraid? And you really realize that. It's like, what bad could really happen from this? Why not try it? So really followed my passions at a young age. Just like I love making beer now, I love skateboarding. That was all I did. I had a skateboard everywhere I went. All I wanted to do was skateboard, hang out with my skateboard friends, look at skateboard magazines, watch videos. So it was the thing that I liked doing at that age. So when a local skateboard store was going out of business, I went to try and get a job there because I was 16 and I wanted to buy a car. I needed a job. So I came back home kind of disgruntled that the store was closing down because they said, we can't make it, sales just aren't good enough. So I was telling my mom, and she said, why don't you buy it? I was like, I can do that? As a 15-year-old, I can buy a skateboard store? She's like, yeah, if you think you can do it, I bet you could. So we worked together to get a loan taken out. I paid my mom back fully throughout the course of running the skateboard store. And I was able to just take that passion. And that's actually where I figured out crowdsourcing before I even really knew what it was. I'd get all the skateboard catalogs in, and I'd take them to the skate park, and I'd have the kids circle all the things that they really liked, and the ones that had the most circles is what I'd order.
That's a good idea.
So, just remember that like a couple months ago. I was like, wow, I was crowdsourcing when I was 15.
I would imagine that most people would just think that you're like the owner's son or something. Like, is the owner really in the back? Can I talk to you?
Yeah. That was a thought a lot, but fortunately, anybody who was not a direct customer, a vendor, I was just talking to on the phone, and they just thought I was, a little girl,
sounded old,
young, or something like that.
Okay, so then after that, so how long did you work at the skateboard shop?
So launched that the summer after my freshman year in high school, and sold it the summer. I didn't sell it. Unfortunately, I had to close it. But right before I moved to Whitewater.
Okay.
So tried to find a buyer, had 3 buyers fall through. Ended up actually opening another skateboard store in a storage unit in Whitewater, and sold skateboards and snowboards out of the storage unit for my first
Nice.
semester at college.
Nice. So when you went to Whitewater, did you always know that you wanted to study entrepreneurship?
I'm not really sure I knew what it was at that point. It was this concept that definitely I really enjoyed, but I didn't know if I had put a term to it yet. That entrepreneurship, even now, I question, is this a field of study, or is this something inherent that can be matched with business, and you can really take it from there. So once I got to Whitewater, they actually started their entrepreneurship program my sophomore year.
Okay.
So there really wasn't a entrepreneurship program to go through. But once I started seeing the coursework that was there and going through that and applying back to some things that were a mix of small business / you're coming up with everything on your own anyways, that's when I really felt that, entrepreneurship, this is what I want to do.
Nice. So when you started home brewing at Whitewater, was it ever on your mind that it would potentially be a viable option for business, or what was the?
It really wasn't. We started homebrewing because we learned we could go to the homebrew store and buy all the things we needed to make beer.
Yeah.
We couldn't go to the liquor store, but we could go there. So we had a lot of fun with that, but it also came from this other passion of mine, which is cooking. I spent a lot of time growing up overseas, got to experience a lot of different cultures and a lot of different foods, and really fell in love with different flavors that don't exist in American cuisine. So I was able to rope in, things that are not traditional into my foods, and then I tried it with beer. So I made like 3 batches of beer that were, a stout and a pale ale, and then the first one was the batshit crazy. Actually, I brewed my third batch of homebrew and put milk, sugar, and coffee in that. I know not too extreme. But then after that, it was mint leaves from the garden and cacao nibs, and just kind of growing up from there, and hot peppers. So taking that love for really cool, unique ingredients and putting them in beers.
Nice. And so the initial concept wasn't it to you tried it with your friends and family, right?
Yeah. So initially at Whitewater, being an entrepreneurship business student, every opportunity that I had or was forced to by classwork, I was making up a different business. Either for the business plan competition or the elevator pitch competition. So I probably burned through like 15 different business ideas throughout college, and it wasn't until I was just about to graduate that we kind of fell into MobCraft.
Gotcha.
So a lot of other ideas that were just kind of thought might be the next best thing.
Sure. So how long did it take before it dawned on you, like, oh my gosh, this can actually be a real thing?
Well, we first got approached by the city of Baraboo. They had a tract of land that they wanted to redevelop, and they wanted a brew pub to go in. And they knew that we liked beer and we were business students. So they said, do you want to come build a brew pub in Baraboo? We'll give you a real good deal on the land. So we were like, that'd be awesome. We ran the quick and dirty financials, and it was like $1 million to build a brew pub. So we were like, that's way too much. We can't do that.
Yeah.
So as a bunch of 22 and 23-year-olds, we decided, we really like beer. We could probably do something, make a business out of this. What other ways can we launch a brewery that don't exist out on the market? We knew everybody and their mother wanted to start a brewery. How could we do something that was very unique? So we remembered back to some of our classes, learning about a company called Threadless, doing a case study on that where they let people decide what t-shirts are made. Graphic designers would put up ideas. Once 500 people committed to buying those, then they do a production run of it. And why don't we try and do that with beer? One, it's a great way to get beer out to a large group of people. 2, it's great for our cash flow and mitigating some of our risks that we're getting people to commit to buying it up front.
Sure.
And then 3, crowdsourcing, letting people come up with it, that makes it for a very, very interesting style of beer.
Yeah. So maybe just for people that don't understand MobCraft's style of thing, how you do things, maybe just explain the crowdsourced concept.
So MobCraft is a crowdsourced brewery. Every month we brew a different batch of beer, and it's all based off the crowd's ideas. So we have a vote round that goes on our website. It should be opening up by Monday. That's all based off user-submitted ideas for beers. So people have submitted everything from I eat salty grapefruit for breakfast to a complete homebrewer's grain bill. And at any point that they leave it off, our brewmaster emails them and says, here's your recipe, here are some tweaks that I made, I filled it out, I added a hop regimen that you didn't come up with. What do you think? You like this? You think it's going to sound, do you think it will be a good beer? So that communication happens, and then it goes into the vote round, where if your beer is up in the vote, you're getting your friends to go and vote, and sharing this idea of your beer. And for 21 days, we have that competition going on, where people are getting their beer to jockey in place and go up in front. And I've seen like Facebook stalked some people who won and like looked at their wall to see what they've been doing, and
Sure.
you know, hey guys, I got 5 days left in my beer. It's down by 3 votes. You know, come on, rally troops, rally troops. So people cast their votes there. The one that wins at the end of the month, we brew, put in a 4-pack of 22-ounce bombers, and then we work with online retailers to ship them out to 30 different states. So we have people interacting with the company from all across the U.S.
Gotcha. So when you had this initial concept, were there naysayers that were saying, oh, this is a stupid idea, or
Yeah.
why are you going to go start a brewery? I would imagine that a lot of people would just say, you're a college kid that wants to start a brewery, like,
Yep.
you know, like, you're
Yeah,
just
you
gonna
and,
drink beer all
you and
day.
every other college student that
Yeah.
wants to start. Yeah. Yeah, so that was a definite hurdle, and something in our minds too, that, you know, I had envisioned other startups of like, wow, nobody else is doing this kind of thing. This is a brand new product or fixes a huge problem. But then you can also look at it from the standpoint of where are all the inefficiencies in this industry that I feel like we can conquer. So not only are we crowdsourcing, we're looking at the industry from a way that other breweries aren't, in, you know, future product development and other areas where you feel like, yeah, we can just keep growing with this and find, you know, new avenues that people aren't looking at in the industry to be successful.
Sure. Plus, you kind of switch the paradigm around in that before it's all about the distribution system, but now, I mean, all the people that vote or the people that have the recipes, they're essentially your marketers for you. You know, I think it's a great concept.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, a winning beer, your name goes on the label. You know, you design the artwork. You know, it's a dialogue back and forth for that. You can write the 90-word blurb on the side of it. We go through a launch party at your favorite bar. You know, all sorts of stuff like that. It's something that you came up with this beer. We want to have a blast. You know, we want to run through this with you, and you know, I want you to be my friend forever.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's like beer to the people. You know,
Yeah.
rather than having somebody in some office figure out the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. So when you went from the initial concept of brewing the 5-gallon batches, and then you bought a fermentation tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the original concept, and I want to hit on this too, because one of my, you know, other follow your passions being the first one, sounds really simple. So does make a minimum viable product. You know, and it's so influential.
How important was that to making that?
I mean, it's the
before
reason we moved forward. You know,
Yeah.
it was the reason we had an initial track record. We were able to, you know, start this out before we were actually doing commercial production and saying every month when we make a homebrewed crowdsourced batch of beer, we're getting like 50 people to vote on which batch of beer we want. You know, so we had people submit ideas, we picked our favorite 4, and then we had people just, you know, check a box for the one that they wanted to. And we were getting up to, you know, 50 people that wanted to
Sure.
vote on that beer. You know, then again, we gave away the beer for free to the people who voted, but that might have been why. But so just seeing that, yeah, people are interested in interacting with this concept and idea gave us that first initial, this could have some commercial viability, and the people that we were dealing with in the future, you know, a little confidence that, you know, they might be onto something.
Mm-hmm.
So how we kind of set up the initial part, you know, we didn't have the capital to build out a brewery. Breweries are expensive. Stainless steel is expensive. We found a brewery here in Madison that had excess capacity. So we partnered up with the House of Brews. He was brewing about 2 days a week. And if you can picture, that equipment is sitting there for the, you know, other 5 days a week.
Sure.
So we came in, bought one fermentation tank. We kind of scrounged up the money that we had saved up. Bought this tank for about $5,000, and that was our tank that we got to brew into once a month. So if you could picture, you know, one really small tank. So we didn't have huge cash flows back then, or
Sure.
any cash flow back then. So we brewed that one monthly batch into that tank, and just started the model on a pickup basis. You know, originally we thought we can crowdsource out beers and put them in the mail and sell them to people, which of course wasn't the case because there's laws. You know, yes, we wanted to pick the most highly regulated industry to get into. No, meat is way worse, but. So, you know, we started out, of course, had to pivot right off the bat. And we said, oh, well, we can't just sell all the crowdsourced beer. So we started, you know, working on some more traditional retail accounts and tap accounts, and working with some, you know, specialty stores that wanted to carry our beer until we could get shipping up and going. And it took us about 9 months for all of our permits to get done, because it's like this permit has to be done before this permit, then this permit can be done. Then you have to wait a month for labels to be approved, then you can get this permit. So, you know, it took quite a while before we could actually get into the model that we wanted.
Okay.
Just that, you know, we started in May, and then we shipped our first beer in June of the following year. So,
Wow.
you know, a year before
So
we got
long
up
time.
and running.
Wow.
You know, sitting idle for that year, of course
Sure.
we're not going to sit idle. So we did a lot of planning, a lot of figuring out, building out our, you know, traditional sales network.
Okay.
So that was that 7-barrel batch. We thought we were going to have to leave the facility that we're in April, so we scrounged up, you know, money. We were able to get an SBA loan. We ended up buying the guts of a brewery that went out of business, and then the House of Brews said, well, you guys can stay longer. So we had just bought a brewery, and then fortunately though, we were able to bring all the fermentation tanks there, and 5 times grow our fermentation capacity by 5x with that addition of tanks. So from that standpoint, we've pushed out more traditional beers, a lot of other fun one-off beers, and then the crowdsourced model, we've been brewing about double the size batches that we ended up doing originally.
Gotcha. So once you figured out all the permit stuff and got, able to scale, how'd you get your first 50 customers or your first 200 customers?
A lot of personal interactions. So fortunately, beer nerds are hard to find when you try to put it down by a demographic, because every type of person loves craft beer, could love craft beer.
Sure.
So we go to a lot of beer festivals. We've been to about 75 beer festivals this year, and there's 3 people in our company. So we've had somewhere it's been 5 different beer festivals in a weekend. And if any volunteers, if you want to run a beer festival, so it's great. We get out there, get interacting with the customers. The type of beer that we have is very different than everything else out there.
Sure.
There's great beer across the board, but this brewery has an IPA, a pale ale, a stout, and a porter. This brewery has those exact same beers, and then you throw MobCraft in the mix, who has like ghost chili chocolate beer and a barley wine with dates and vanilla. Yeah, and so those are ones that really stand out on the palate.
Sure.
So people, 1, they remember that beer, and then 2, we bring the iPad that has the vote going on, at the beer festival. So it's 2 touches. It's here's the beer I want, here's my email address, and people are into the model.
Sure.
So we do a lot of those personal interactions there.
That's a great concept. So how has the marketing changed since you first launched?
We've kind of thought of different channels that we want to do. Originally, we started doing Facebook advertising, which was really, really effective, trying to push people to a vote. But then we figured out we're trying to explain 2 different things. Go to MobCraft, learn why you're at MobCraft, and then vote, and then purchase. So we've kind of done a little pivot where there's a month-long window before the beer is actually complete and ready to ship, that people can continue to make pre-orders even after the beer has been completed.
Okay.
So we figured out that a group of people likes voting, a group of people likes buying once the vote is done, and then a group of people likes waiting till it's at the liquor store. So there's all those different channels that like interacting at their own different times. So we're going to try to push a lot more people to the funnel in the middle, where they're just buying a beer, and then once they get it, then they learn a little bit more about the vote and say, oh, I could have voted on this beer, and then kind of start at the beginning of the process from that point.
Gotcha. Is that one of the bigger challenges of explaining just what your different concept to people?
Yes, it depends on who you're talking to. If people get crowdsourcing and the model and have heard of other companies that use crowdsourcing, then they can kind of get it. If they're just like, I go to a liquor store and I buy the beer that I like because I've tried it before,
Sure.
Then it's a little bit harder to sell, because no, it's like reading a bottle of wine that you've never tried before. You read the characteristics of it, the flavors, what it pairs well with.
Sure.
That's the same as reading the beer label of a beer that you've never tried.
Do people, at these beer festivals, what sort of reaction do you get when you explain your concept?
A lot of people really like the concept. Sometimes, at the end of beer festivals, if you can imagine, people have been drinking. Some people you get that blank stare and you can realize that this person's not hearing anything that you're saying, and just let them keep enjoying the beer. So we let them off. But for the most part, people are like, oh, no way. Somebody came up with this beer and I could do that too. It's a lot of home brewers' dream to see a beer get commercialized.
Sure.
We invite you out to the brewery to come brew the batch of beer with us. At any point in time, we want to have people be involved as much as possible.
Make it as personal as you can.
Yeah.
So I know that with the crowdfunding, there's new laws over the summer. Explain that process, because you were the first company in Wisconsin to take advantage of those new crowdfunding laws. What was that whole process like? That must have been a legal headache.
So basically, we love this idea of crowdfunding, obviously, because it's a crowdsourced brewery. Not only are we gaining investors in the company, but brand ambassadors. So, and I can't talk to it too much just for legal reasons, especially because we're not staying in Wisconsin, but Wisconsin passed this bill in November that allowed for this unsolicited sale of securities to the general public. So any startup can go to an internet portal after they've applied with the Department of Financial Institutions, and they can sign up to pretty much run the equivalent of a Kickstarter campaign, but selling equity in the company versus a reward. So that was passed in November. The Department of Financial Institutions wrote how that law would actually work in practice until about June. And then that's when we first came on board, had all of our ducks in a row to start in June. But one little blurb that we missed was we had to have a Wisconsin chartered bank be the escrow agent that holds the funds between investor and completion of the campaign. So we burned through about 25 banks, closer to 35 banks, before we found a bank that wanted to be this escrow agent. You know, it was new, nobody had ever heard of it, there was no ruling from their overarching industry organization, the Wisconsin Bankers Association.
Sure.
So a lot of people were just leery to start. So once we found that bank, then we were able to get going and kick the campaign off.
Nice. And so how's your funding changed since then?
Just like the whole overarching picture.
Just
of what
raising,
we
yeah,
wanna
like
do.
raising capital.
Well, it changed quite a bit because when we started, we thought that's all we were going to have to raise, and then kind of with this planned build out, it just keeps getting more and more expensive as we go. So, I mean, it changes to be, I'm learning a lot more as well about how you actually finance a big project like this. So being able to see that there are, different loan programs out there that are revolving loan funds that help, clean energy initiatives. So we could say, great, we want to buy a bottling line, we want to buy a canning line instead of a bottling line, because the environmental footprint of cans are this versus bottles, it's this, so it's much better to be packaging and producing mostly in cans, and that kind of fits that, great, this piece of equipment is better overall, and it kind of fits into that program where we can get some low interest financing for that.
Gotcha.
So as a startup that has a lot of capital equipment, that's a lot different than a tech startup.
Sure.
We're probably looking at our entire raise being about a 70-30 split debt to equity,
Okay.
Versus obviously very different for something that has non-tangible assets that banks can take liens out against.
Sure. So is what's one of the biggest challenges with running a brewery? It seems like you got all these different pieces that are floating around, and your kind of job's to tie them all together.
Yeah, and it's very tough. I mean, just like any startup, once you hit the point where at our first meetings, we were like having a beer break in the middle, and we just thought it was so cool and fun, and then it kind of just got down to business, then it really got down to business, and now it's just all business. So it's at that standpoint where it's really fun that we're able to start bringing in other people that we can trust to accomplish other tasks.
Sure.
So I just love being able to, I guess, in the beginning, when you look at somebody that you could work with and pay like, $100 an hour to do something, that's just unheard of, you can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But, once, like, one of those people at a time, bringing them onto the team and saying, yep, we can probably afford to do this just because we know it's really important. So just, for instance, having the books straightened out instead of, my time being in QuickBooks figuring out why the heck nothing's balancing, having somebody to be able to do that. Bringing on salespeople, we just hired a Milwaukee sales rep. So it's awesome to be able to see somebody's passion and excitement to like bring on a whole territory and like, you guys are here, I'm gonna bring you here, this is gonna be awesome.
That's great.
So that's the part that I really like about it.
Is it a challenge running it with friends? You went to college with them, and this was like your baby that you had during school, and so now
Yeah.
when you have to make long-term decisions and execute plans, how do you settle that balance?
So I always say don't hire friends because that just makes it the easiest. So like with with some of them it's like friends of friends, where Andrew's friend is also our Milwaukee sales rep, and we are friends, but I don't feel like it's the that level like we're best friends and I can't talk to you like yep, I can still talk to you like we're working together, this is a project that we're working on, we can push friends aside. With my two partners, Andrew and Giotto, I went to college with Giotto, met him freshman year. We were in the entrepreneurship organization together for all 4 years of college. So we were able to, we had like one event that was super frustrating, but it was that turning point where we really focused and had to figure out that we need to be able to trust each other as business people, not as friends. Andrew and I got to that point a lot quicker. He joined the company full-time about 6 months prior. So I think that time window just really set in. I think it takes about 6 months for you to transition from job, paycheck, security to clustered, solve problem type of thing. Andrew and I had a kind of an aha moment when he was running our bottling line that we just purchased, and it was like more than we paid for college, so we were really scared. It was don't break my Cadillac kind of thing. So there's, he was like, Henry, if you just keep breathing down my back, I'm going to break this machine on accident, and it's going to be your fault because you just don't back off. And I was like, that's so true. I don't need to be concerned that you know how to run this piece of equipment because I should trust you to have that skill. And, it was kind of that instance where you're like, Henry, I'm going to let you business. And I was like, Andrew, I'm going to let you brew. And now we trust each other completely to just run those operations,
So where do you see the vision of MobCraft going, and kind of how is that? Was it a challenge to align the visions of the different people that you're working with?
So it's always a huge pivot. Everybody comes into it with their own pie-in-the-sky idea of what they want it to be, and until it starts to execute, you don't quite have the same vision necessarily.
Sure.
Once it starts to grow and you can see clear paths, then it's a lot easier to figure out, yeah, this is how we want to do it. So the part that stayed true to our business model, that like the only thing out of our business plan that is actually true still today, is this interaction with customers that we were hoping would happen. So our theory was that if we're crowdsourcing out these beers to, let's just call them super beer nerds, like this top 5% of beer consumer, they're the ones who are really loud about beer, talk about it, tweet about it, Untapped check-ins, maybe have their own beer blogs or run liquor stores. Those are the types of people who have been ordering from different states. So we're seeing pockets of brand awareness form in those different states. Like for some reason, which we're trying to figure out right now, we're shipping a lot of beer to Georgia and a lot of beer to Florida. So those might be, some of our first markets that we open up after Wisconsin.
Okay.
The plan is to build brand awareness with this, higher price point, higher quality, unique beer, and then go into that market with a flagship line.
Okay. Is the idea to get into liquor stores and bars, or is it more of the straight sales? Just
Yep.
everything?
Yep, liquor stores and bars at the end of it. So it's, the crowdsourcing, I call it our revenue generating marketing plan. We're able to get beer really far across the U.S., with the company interaction, not necessarily just buying it and trading it with your friends, in hopes of eventually building out a presence in those different markets.
So do you have a typical customer that buys from you? Like what's their makeup typically?
Yeah, that's another strange one. We had like the guy who won this beer that's going to come out tomorrow. It was his 50th birthday when we were brewing that beer, like the same day. So I wouldn't even expect an older generation to interact with us,
Sure.
But they were quite extensively. We've had people who have families and 3 or 4 kids who are interacting. We've had the guy that's just right out of college. So putting that
It's all
craft
over.
beer fan into a demographic is really tough. That's why our focus is, instead of advertising to groups that might also like craft beer, it's like, craft beer in general, it's huge. There's so many people that are in that segment.
Yeah, that's one of the big trends going on with craft beer. I'm sure you have a biased perspective on how long term that trend will keep going, but what are your thoughts on the popularity of craft beer all of a sudden?
Yeah, and one fact that really resonated with me, I was at a beer conference and we were talking about coffee, and the split between your good old can of Joe cup of coffee in the morning, that your grandpa has at his station versus craft coffees is about a 60-40 split, where 40% of the coffee drinkers are drinking specialty coffees. Craft beer is about 8-92. 92% of the people in the U.S. are drinking, or 92% of the beer consumed is, that's American light lager, AB and Bev beers, and Miller Coors beers, and 8% is craft beer. So kind of aligning that 40% who are drinking craft coffees, there's a lot of crossover in that demographic and that type of person with craft beer fans.
Okay.
So just seeing that, yeah, I think the market could continue to grow, definitely in that area. Some forecasts are looking at 20% of the beer by 2020 versus the 8% now.
Okay. How does Madison compare to other cities like this? I would imagine that we're more into the craft beers than other cities.
Yeah,
Or what do you think?
it depends on the city, and where we have a very progressive city. But then you look at like the whole state of Oregon drinks more craft beer than non-craft beer.
Really?
Yep.
Is that the only state?
I don't know. That's just one that I read in a
Gotcha.
in a blurb like Oregon drinks more craft beer than normal beer. So.
Yeah. So compared to, so you started this initially in Whitewater. You maybe could have started in Milwaukee or maybe started in Chicago. Why'd you choose Madison?
I really love the community that we live in, and I feel like there's a really deep interaction with your products here. I feel like just going down to the farmers market, it's so huge. It's what we really, what feels good and comfortable to do. So I feel like starting this kind of brewery that has such a huge community involvement, even though the community is not only Madison but online, I felt like it was a very good city to start it off in.
What's your favorite part about running?
Creating things.
Yeah.
Coming to it every day with not knowing what the problem's going to be. Although it is kind of frustrating some days. I'm a professional email checker, I might have worked on my actual work for like a half hour today, but just always having a new thing to come up with and seeing how that's created, and I really love seeing my business partners take ownership of things.
Sure.
For instance, with our sales, we've recently transferred over where Giotto, you run the sales meetings and you give me the deliverables, you give me the tasks that you want me to do. So seeing just that, kick up an energy, it's like he owns this is his thing, this is what he runs. So continuing to see that grow across more and more people as we continue to hire, I really enjoy that.
When you make a batch of beer, I would imagine that you have to go through a lot of bad batches of beer before you finally figure the right recipe. Is that true? Or?
Surprisingly, you'd think that. That's what most breweries will do. They'll tweak batches, but Andrew is just a brilliant scientist.
Because he studied microbiology?
Yeah, he's a microbiologist. He brewed for Leinenkugels for a few years. He made ethanol for a few years before that at an ethanol plant, not in his basement. And what he can do with the beer is it's very unique. So he understands stylistically what each beer is, and he understands balance, which is one of the hardest things in really unique, crazy beers. If you're going to have ghost peppers, you don't want it in a Pilsner in the same fashion that you do in a robust porter. So he gets that how he needs to play flavors off. Okay. And the methods that we use to add these flavors, we just buy a bunch of ghost peppers and we put them in the beer, but we do it in a controlled way that we can kind of make adjustments along the way to make sure we're not overpowering right off the bat. So he understands the stylistic ways to brew every style of beer and does a really good job at it. And then he can kind of layer all the different flavors into it at the points that they need to go into the process.
Okay, gotcha. So I guess just, grand vision 20, 30 years out, what do you think this MobCraft could be?
Well, I love the concept, and I'm a fan of all sorts of other things. I love hot sauce, and I love coffee, so I'd love to see the model kind of bridge out to different industries. But as far as just the beer, we're really excited about building out our own facility over the next year, and that's going to be with the future in mind, putting in a brew house that's large enough to really sustain our growth for quite some time. So I'd like to open up new markets in different cities, and get MobCraft farther across the U.S. in a more traditional sense.
Cool. All right, so now I'll just open it up for questions. Who has a question for him?
I love how you talked about community and the farmers market, and I'd be curious because I know just enough to be dangerous, but my dear friends who are chemists and engineers in the beer world, scientists, they really lean more heavily to the science aspect of it. So you're getting your hops and sourcing it, because as I understand, Wisconsin at one time in our history actually used to be New York in growing it. So where is the Wisconsin market in sourcing your hops, and is it relevant?
Yep, it is. So a very fun thing about brewing and where we live, there's this hop belt that grows around the U.S. at both the north and the south, so in Argentina and New Zealand as well. But we grow a lot of hops in Wisconsin now. There was unfortunately a powdery mildew that wiped out the whole hop crop a long time ago, and it took a while for farmers to actually get back into growing hops. Where you go coast to coast varies quite a bit on the varieties that grow well there. So there are some species of hops that you can't grow in Wisconsin that you can only grow, in a climate like in Washington, where there's, near the ocean, more temperate. So for a lot of our base hops, we actually buy them from a hop processing facility that's the building next to us. It's called Wisconsin Hop Exchange. So, for the hops that we can use for our base bittering, we'll use those. If we want to get like a very citrusy floral hop that doesn't grow in Wisconsin, we'll buy those from elsewhere. All the grain that we buy comes from Chilton, Wisconsin. Breese Malting Company is in Chilton, which is fortunately right there. It's very, very close and convenient for us to get stuff from them. And then everything that we put into our beer is, except for in the winter months, fresh produce. So for our hot pepper beers, we actually just go to the garden center, like right next to us. It's an indoor gardening facility called Paradigm Garden Center. You don't need too many scorpion peppers or 7-pot peppers to make a beer spicy. They're hotter than ghost peppers, so you only need like 10, 15 of them. We get our carrots from a place in Jefferson when we did a carrot beer. Just kind of, we're sourcing individual ingredients for all these crowdsourced beers. So wherever we can find them that's close by, not only is it very fun to help out a local business and buying them there, it just makes sense.
Beautiful.
We don't need to buy something from 1,000 miles away. We can get it from 5 miles away.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, could you just describe some of the different types of beers that have been voted and implemented, and then what do you think? What are your favorites?
Yeah, so our craziest ones that have came in and have actually been brewed was that I eat salty grapefruit for breakfast. That was a beer that was actually created. So this is how Andrew's mind goes about it. He's like, okay, salty grapefruit, beer, Gosa, grapefruit, okay, Gosa, this ancient realm of Germany near the Gosa River where there are high salt content in the water tables, and you know that I can grab some Amarillo hops that have grapefruit flavor to them and zest a bunch of grapefruit. So he made this Gosa, a really cool beer, light 4.5% ABV, and then the grapefruit, very citrusy flavors that came onto it. We're actually going to brew this one probably on a yearly basis every summer. So that one was a lot of fun. I really liked the Arabian Date Night. It was a barley wine style ale. It's about 9.5% ABV. It goes into brandy barrels, and it's been sitting there for about 8 months. We're taking it out of the brandy barrels on Friday, and then it'll sit on dates and vanilla beans for about a week. So that one's really tasty. We did the Mayan chocolate chili ale, which was kind of a takeoff of what you would find with a corn-based beer from, you know, the time of the ancient Maya, and then it had ghost peppers and chocolate in it. So that was a very unique beer. We did Candy for Breakfast, which was a chocolate peanut coffee porter. That was a lot of fun. I mean, you don't see peanuts in beer too often just because, you know, oil in beer doesn't quite work out very well. But Andrew was able to do it in a way that it came out. So, and I'm a beer fan across the board. Don't have a favorite. Any other ones? Yeah.
I was just curious, I like your analogy of threadless and sort of crowdsourced design, but did you have any misgivings about the fact that sort of logos and t-shirts are a very visual medium and beer is not?
Yeah, so that kind of, the problems that we've seen in that are the fact of, I've never tasted this beer, why would I want to buy it? You know, so that's came up quite a bit. But we also have the things that are, you know, how often do you go and buy something based off the label, right, and based off the name? And you talk to a lot of my friends who are big winos, it's like, yeah, I'm kind of guilty of that always. I just see something that looks cool and I buy it. You know, so we come up with very creative names. If a beer comes in, you know, like our first beers were chocolate banana stout, hazelnut amber. It's like, that's really boring, right? So we've kind of developed more interesting names that go along with the beers and along with the people's ideas of what they want that beer to be like, their attitudes. For instance, the chocolate raspberry porter, that was the name that it came in, and it ended up with Beelzebub's Run. And Beelzebub is another name for the devil. The guy who submitted it was like this big metal head, you know, and so it was his personality that went into the naming of the beer. And then the art is like this, you know, badass raspberry on a motorcycle with a MobCraft leather jacket, just burning out and spitting cacao nibs out of the back. You know, so it does get really appealing graphically once that beer comes out.
So, you've been doing this a while now. What would be, you know, one bit of advice now that you've kind of learned a little bit to give the people?
Yeah, I would say one thing that I liked that we executed well, I think, was the minimum viable product. In talking with a lot of startups in the business incubator that I came out of, you know, a lot of people are just afraid to go find that first customer, and it just makes so much more sense. It's like, if you can prove to somebody to actually buy your product or start using your product, you can get feedback right off the bat. You know, on our labels in the beer that we gave away, we put a QR code that said, you know, scan this, rate our beer, we want to hear your feedback. So we were able to gain feedback right off the bat. So I would say never be scared to try and find a first customer, even if your product isn't perfect. You know, you can always adapt from then. People will understand that you're new and you're starting up and you're gonna make mistakes. And you know, that's kind of part of the interest in interacting with new products. And one thing that we didn't do that I would advise is, you know, once you're ready to really get into it, make sure that everybody is committed and ready to go. I know it sounds really hard because it's like job, paycheck, no money, how are we going to do this? But we struggled having a business partner working nights for about 1.5 years before he, you know, fully committed to jumping in the company. And that was just based off an ultimatum that I said, it's, you know, work or you're on here full time. Just pick one because we need to move. So if you can kind of gauge that, get a bunch of people, you are going to need a lot of help and a lot of thought power. So as much time as you can physically put into it, it's really going to be beneficial.
Yeah. So if you could do this all again, knowing what you know now, how would you navigate this differently? Hindsight is 20/20.
Yep. I mean, it's always going to be I'll say something and then I'll contradict myself in saying it. I'd love to have our own facility right off the bat because I feel like there would be that much more, freedom and ability to grow faster. But then I look at what we've done and how we've done it. It's like, well, would we really need to grow faster because we can't make the errors that we made on a super large scale? Plus, we've been living in somebody else's brew house for a year and a half, seeing everything that goes wrong and goes right on that side of their business. So, being able to, I can't really say that one would be better than the other.
What's been your biggest failure as an entrepreneur, and what did you learn from it?
My biggest failure, let's see. This one was pretty recent, actually. So when we went into the crowdfunding, we switched from an LLC to a C Corp. So my thought process was LLC INC. Okay, that's 3 letters. I can just, file a change of name for everything. So I just went through with that. It's a whole separate entity. It's taxed differently. The government looks at it differently. We had to apply for all new federal brewing permits. That's that whole 9-month runway of getting new ones. All based off of this one change. And then, of course, as an LLC, you close that. It ends, you have to file a final return on it. Like, okay, it's due at tax season, right? When all your taxes are due, no, it's not. So we were incurring like $450 a month fines for not filing a final return. So there's just a lot of those things that, how would you know about that? I talked to my lawyer and they helped us make the change, but this was an accounting issue and we didn't have an accountant. So that was kind of a bummer. But then it runs the whole gamut. Andrew learning how to run the bottling machine, put like $1,500 worth of short fills out, and it's like, well, you got to learn how to do the bottling machine sometime. So now we have a bunch of short bottles, and so there's always things.
Make a new label for it, sell it like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, just they get real mad at you from the government if you're selling things that, even if it's over full, it's like, well, who paid the tax on that thing that's over full? This you counted that as the exact 22 ounces that are inside this bottle. So there's always, you're just going to screw up on stuff all the time, and that's part of it. Can't feel bad about it. Can't yell at anybody for it because it's all a learning experience. Nor can you dodge it either. Realistically, there's what's worse, spend $1,000 on an accountant for a year or make a $400 mistake when you don't have $1,000. Nor 400, but.
So I think one of the biggest challenges for a startup is how to scale up as you grow, and especially with investing capital and getting to that next level. How much of your time is working on trying to figure out when to jump to that next level where you're going to need a lot of capital, like your own facility, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that time is upon us and passing and ahead of us, and it's like at all times, is when I feel like that would be good to move forward. Literally fundraising and doing that, it could be a full-time job. Unfortunately, I'm running a business. Like when I said I check emails all day and I worked on that for an hour today. I was able to open up my new spreadsheet that I'm putting financial projections in and read it over before I had to go back to the day-to-day and make sure everything's running smoothly. So that standpoint of when I really felt like that was a good idea was just kind of looking at our sales and our track record and what we could potentially do. So right now we sell about 80% of our beer in 22-ounce bottles, and the last batch that we sold, we had 1 case left over the day after it hit the market. So it's like, okay, if we can sell that style of beer that comes in at a $11 bottle, there's a lot of the rest of the market that I think we could potentially enter into as well. Having a lot more on-tap presence. That's only comes with extra growth and extra fermentation capacity. So there's stuff that's missing that we're not taking advantage of selling beer into different segments of the market because we don't have that capacity.
Any other questions for me? Where can we find your beer?
Oh man, well, first of all, mobcraftbeer.com. You can vote there. Unfortunately, here's another failure. We lost our shipper that was the online liquor store that did the final transactions about a month ago, and now we finally found a new one. So that was one that, great, we're finally churning, rocking, and then now we have to just not have a vote. So, but this month we'll be back on track. So probably by next week people can vote online. And then if you're in the Madison, Milwaukee area, on our About Us page, we've got a map with about the 75 locations that we're at on tap. Otherwise, the closest from here is Riley's Wines of the World right there, and the Old Fashioned right over there. Great, cool. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Henry. Feel free to hang out, network. We got beer back there, and hang out there. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Hey, thanks, Greg.
Yeah. And our next event will be with Greg Robinson of 4490 Ventures, which is a venture capital firm here in Madison. It's on December 17th in this space. So enjoy the beer. I'm sure you may be able to talk to Henry for a little bit before he goes. And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.